Elements of the Omniverse Genesis. Chapter 1. The Adventure Begins. The ancient forest was a vast, thick place full of vegetation, strange life forms, and things that nobody would ever want to mess with. From large theropods to strange wyvern creatures, this was not the place that anybody locally would go into. That is, these two weren't locals. To the tops of the trees, a single being, a blur, began to swing through the treetops. With a blue uniform, a blue hat, gray and black stripes, a black mask, and a long golden stick that had a hook at the end, this was none other than Sly Cooper, thief extraordinaire. Sly himself had stopped in one of the boughs of the many big trees. He began to look at a map that seemed to be a little more or less worn out. After judging where they were, he heard a grunt from behind, of somebody that he recognized. He then came down from the top of the tree, down to the bottom of the forest floor, where apparently the bushes were rustling. However, he wasn't really afraid. Out came a young lady who basically didn't look exactly like a lady entirely. She was average height, had two color strands of hair, brown with a red streak, a blue vest, a black t-shirt with long sleeves underneath, a pair of goat legs, a long cat-like tail, and a hat that resembled a panda. With large green eyes, almost brown skin, and essentially a chubby set and a little bit chubby, this was Rin Camellia, leader of the Skybreaker pack. The two had come here, along with several of their members, in order to try and be a bit more interested in their powers. They decided that it would be time to get some money for their group, so they decided to go out and find some jobs. Sly himself found the job, but apparently it was kind of shady, to say the least. Rin all of a sudden tripped over a root that she didn't see coming, and landed flat on her gut. Sly chuckled. Rin rolled her eyes and looked up. "Care to help me up?" she said. Sly then offered a hand, and helped and hoisted her back on her feet. He then looked around, and then pointed with his staff, saying, "Okay, not too far now. Should be down that way." Ren crossed her arms and looked at him skeptical. "You do know you said that the last 2 times, right?" Sly rolled his eyes and looked at her with a smirk. "I know that, but this time it's different. This time it's true." Ren said, "Sure. Remind me why we're walking through some forsaken jungle, looking for some weird rock." Sly turned to him and said, "Hey, this ain't just any ordinary rock, okay? I've heard stories of this thing." Ren raised an eyebrow. "So it's that valuable?" Sly then turned back and decided to head down toward the forest way, holding up a tree branch, though it didn't actually hit Ren over the head. "It's more than just valuable. It's an artifact of ancient history." Rin really couldn't care less and didn't really think too much of it. However, when the bushes rustled, she then looked over and saw something interesting. Apparently, there were some large cow-like creatures that resembled parasaurs, with long bony protrusions on the tips of their tails and the back of their heads. Their round horse-shaped faces often reminded Ren of something that would look like out of a D&D campaign. The creatures were gray, large, and had a weird indent in their backs. They also had black stripes. There were 3 of them. As the creatures were moving through the forest, Ren and Sly began to go back on their own path. It wasn't long until they hit a clearing, one that Sly was certain would find what they were looking for. Ren just took the beauty of the place in. There was a small pond not too far away. There was also a few Pokemon playing around on the ground. a Passerichu, a couple Baniris, and a Cinchu, and a Cinchinu, and a Minchino. In the trees, there were sounds of birds and pterosaurs and all sorts of things. And there were a couple of berry bushes here and there, too. One of the few things that struck her odd, though, was the strange rock formations. It was a strange rock pillar shape that looked like it was pointing outward, like a tooth. Other than that, there wasn't anything here. Sly then pulled the map out and grumbled more, somehow muttering curses under his breath. Rin chuckled and elbowed him. Right, this is definitely where we were supposed to find that thing, right? She stated. Sly rolled his eyes. Look, I got this map from a reliable source that said that this stone is here. Rin raised an eyebrow and mocked him. Yeah, from a hooded figure that you didn't see their face. You do realize how stupid that sounds, right? Sly then sighed. Yeah, I know. I probably should have asked more questions, but hey, the guy gave us 300 gold pieces just to do the job. Rin then raised an eyebrow again, this time with actual confusion. Why would they give us that much gold? Wouldn't they actually give us the gold after the job is done? Sly shrugged. Sometimes some clients take something more for incentive, like some now, then the rest later. And how much gold did they say they were going to pay afterward? Sly said, as many bags as we can carry, apparently. So, like, how much is that? Sly then thought hard. I'd say 2,000 gold pieces, maybe? Rin's eyes went wide. Was this stone really all that talk? She'd never heard of such a thing. Well, whatever, she said, shrugging. I'm going to look around this little opening. It's nice out here. Sly, unfortunately, was too busy in the map to respond. Rin was watching the many different creatures and insects that walked around in the small clearing. It was almost like a meadow out of a place in the forest. She even began to walk around just looking at some of the stuff too. In one of the trees, there was a small bat hanging upside down. It didn't look like a normal bat, though. Maybe it was some different kind of thing. She also saw a weird reptile that looked like a cross between a monitor lizard and a cat. It was yellow with orange spikes on its back, a green underbelly with a dewlap, and it kept on flicking its tongue in and out. The creature let out a little bark, and two more paler versions of this strange reptilian character, came out of the bushes, following it into the forest on the other side. She also noticed there was some other Pokemon nearby, some Stantler, Sawsbuck, and Deerling. There was even a Levani not too far away. This place seemed to have like a peaceful aura around there too. It wasn't long until she noticed that she was at the edge of the forest again. Well, the forest edge of the clearing. But as she was about to turn back to Sly, she felt a strange, strong presence not too far away. She looked in the forest, hoping to see what it was, and in some of the shadows she saw two glowing eyes. They looked fierce, terrifying, and cold. Rin gulped. She decided to back away slowly. Normally that was a good way to keep yourself safe from any kind of predator, but she didn't know what the heck this thing was. This was a different universe after all. As she began to back up, however, she failed to notice something underfoot. It isn't until too late when she realized what was going on, when the ground came out from underneath her. And as she yelled out and hollered, Sly finally looked up from the map he was looking at and saw Rin literally fall through the ground. Sly immediately ran over to where the hole was and initially tried calling out to her. No response. Only wails of falling. But all of a sudden, thump, Oof! Sly then called down, Rin, you okay down there? Rin groggily, while she was still a little dusty, she felt fine. Yeah, I'm alright, she called up. Luckily, I found on the one part of my body that has a built-in airbag. Sly chuckled. Not exactly a good time for jokes, he thought. He then pulled out of a knapsack on his back and pulled out a long rope. He threw it down. Can you reach it? He yelled out. Rin looked up from where she fell. Unfortunately, she didn't even see the rope. I don't think that rope is long enough, dude. Sly muttered, grumbling. It wasn't until Rin looked around when she noticed there was a small passageway. Something that looked like it was connected to something bigger. Hey, I think I might know another way out of here. Oh, don't you dare, Sly stated. I am not letting you down there, okay? I am not leaving you down there. What other choice do we have? Look, I'll find the opening, come find you, and then we'll go find that stupid stone down here. You don't even know where it goes, Sly tried to reason. Besides, who knows what could be down there? There could be all kinds of traps and things. I'm pretty sure I know what a trap looks like, she stated. A little too confident in her abilities, but also still wanting to just look around. I'll see you when I get out of here. Wherever that is, she then whispered the final part to herself and began to walk down. Sly kept on calling her name, but she was already determined to go down the hallway. Great, just great, he said, literally kicking up a bunch of leaves and sticks. I can't believe this whole time I followed a stupid map into a stupid forest that's got all this stupid crap in here. Rin falls through the ground. Now we're completely separated, and I still can't find that stupid stinking temple entrance, he said before kicking a rock. Unfortunately, the rock didn't actually get kicked. In fact, Sly literally felt like his toes broke and literally jumped on one leg holding his foot. Strange enough, the rock didn't actually move the way a normal rock did. In fact, after he kicked it, it did a thunk sound, as if it switched over something. Then the ground began to shake. Sly wasn't really noticing it at first until he fell over. And that's when he noticed it. All the Pokemon and creatures that were already in that meadow were starting to run. The ground was shaking, almost as if it was an earthquake. Great, just my luck, Sly stated. I lose my friend down there, and now there's an earthquake happening. But it isn't until he hears a large crumbling sound when he looks behind him and sees that tooth-shaped stone start to raise up out of the ground, revealing a doorway of some kind. Surprisingly enough, the stone didn't necessarily look too much like a doorway when it was underground, but as it raised up, it had several steps and a strange pattern that was over the door opening. In fact, the door opening itself didn't even look too bad. It looked like an elaborate ancient artifact. Of course, another tsung sound as something in the back opened. He then looked in and saw that there were these steps filing out in a dunk 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 dunk. He thought it was weird. He'd never seen anything that complicated in a temple, and he'd been in his fair share of temples. Sly looked around, looked at the map, and noticed that the temple face looked exactly like what was on the map. He then looked at the stone at the top, and then looked at the map picture, and then shrugged. Well, I guess that's one way to find an entrance. I guess she took the back end. Hold on, Rin, he said to himself. I'm coming in after you. Rin herself was walking along the corridors of the strange passageway she was walking in. She noticed that there were a lot of pictures of creatures on the walls there. There were Pokemon, Digimon, animals, mammals, reptiles, dinosaurs, and even a few creatures she hardly ever recognized. She even saw some that stood out to her completely. One looked like it was a combination between a dragon and a hawk, while another one looked like it was a giant spider. Hopefully they didn't exist here anymore, she thought. Then, of course, came another creature. It resembled that of a Pokemon she knew, but the body shape is only where it was. On its back were maple-shaped leaf plates on its back, a long tail, thick large legs, a buff upper body, and a small head that was ended like a square, almost like an eagle's face. She chuckled and shrugged. I guess that's one strange-looking Tyranitar, she stated, walking down the pathway still. Essentially, she began to get close to a doorway. Her walking continued until she hit a doorway, with a large door there, too. Dead end, she stated. Well, I guess I'm going to have to find a way back, I guess. As she was about to back up and turn around, her foot stepped on a pedal, and it went... Uh-oh, Rin thought. She may not have been a Tomb Raider expert, but even she knew that she may have just triggered a booby trap. Rin braced herself for something bad to happen, but nothing did. Instead, the very large doorway began to open up, raising up, and revealing a strange sight to behold. In this building, in this big room, there were all sorts of statues of different creatures and beings. One looked like a werewolf, but like less were-ish, like bestial and more like a natural being. And several other statues of different creatures as well. But there were 5 that caught her best interest. There were 4 on looking at the creature, almost in a bowing sense. The first one was obvious. It was a tyrannosaur. It seemed to be bowing its head in respect, even kneeling down before it. The next one was a human knight, with its sword drawn out and held to the side, and him kneeling down. The other one seemed to be a Pokemon. It resembled that of a Lucario, but it seemed to have a few other tidbits here and there too, almost like it was a Mega Evolved version. And then finally, another one she recognized was a lion. The lion itself was kneeling, lowering his head down in respect. But it was the center statue that caught her eye the most, almost as if all the light was shining on it. It resembled a large fox, but the similarities began to end as she noticed that there were some things different about it. For one thing, the creature had fingers, yet it seemed quite a quadrupedal stance. The statue itself was made of gold, with ruby tinting where the whiskers and eyes would be, and it also had 9 tails. Strange, she thought. I've heard of kitsune before, but never anything that looked like that. But it wasn't long until she saw something inside the paw of it. In the right paw, there was a blue stone with white stripes that seemed to emanate energy. Rin walked up close to it and saw it for all its beauty. The stone seemed to have a calming effect, almost as if it was filling with hope. Like that hope could help fill with anything. Rin was wanting to touch it, but she had seen Aladdin and several other movies where basically, if they do take something, something's going to happen. But she didn't have a rock or anything equally heavy or same size as it. So she decided to turn her head back and reach out tentatively. She then grabbed it, pulled it to her chest, and expected something to happen. A moment. Another moment. 3 moments. Nothing. She opened her eye, looking around. Nothing happened. In fact, nothing made a sound or anything. She looked up at the statue and noticed that the little red eye bits looked like they were looking at her, as in almost like a questioning look. Was there a reason for that? She then looked at the large stone in her hand. It was shaped like a diamond of sorts. Not cut completely like a diamond, but like in a sort of diamond-esque shape. The stone itself was large. She wouldn't be able to put it in a bag anyway. She was wondering if there was a way to make it smaller, or if it was smaller form. All of a sudden, the stone then glowed a little gleam of white light, and shrunk in her hand. Perfectly carryable size. Rin was able to put it in a pocket inside her shirt, inside her vest. Huh, she thought. That's an odd thing for a rock to do. All of a sudden, she heard another mechanism, thinking it was the same door she came in. But when she looked, this was actually the front of the room. She looked around. She didn't step on anything. She then looked at the statues. All of them seemed to be interesting of some kind. She then looked back at the golden statue of the nine-tailed fox. It looked like it still had that curious look on its face, almost as if it was asking her something. She had a soft smile at it, too. She didn't know why, but for some reason, it seemed welcoming. She then shook the thought out of her head. Whatever that thing was in its past life, this thing was now ancient history. She then decided to go out the door, hoping that nothing bad would happen. But before she left the doorway, she took one last look at that golden statue, almost as if she was memorizing it. She then left the room. As the door closed behind her, the light that shone over the top began to fade. The only thing that glowed when the door completely closed was the light that was still emanating from the red eyes inside the golden statue, before they too glowed out. Sly had realized why they couldn't find the place initially. The temple wasn't above ground, it was underground. And on top of that, the temple was huge. The whole place was so big that it was inside a giant cavern. But to get to that temple, he had to cross a chasm. A very big, dark, deep chasm. And it was only a mile-wide bridge that literally walked all the way by 2,500 feet. Thankfully, the bridge was stable, but again, why would they go through such great lengths to make this thing so extravagant? Why was it underground in the first place? He then took a pebble from the ground that he picked up, looked over the side of the chasm, and then dropped the pebble. He listened. Nothing. He counted. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And yet, when he got to 15, he just stopped counting because he didn't hear anything. Maybe the pebble was so small you couldn't hear it from down there. Who knows? Sly shrugged. He then walked into the doorway of the big temple area. There seemed to be a strange altar-like area with a few seats here and there. The altar seemed to have some strange writing on it. And behind it was a picture. This, of course, was a picture depicting of a nine-tailed fox, like the one Rin saw earlier in the statue. But this one had a different shape. This one seemed to be standing on its hind legs, raising its top paws up. And above, he saw the miracle sapphire. At least that's what he identified it as. Maybe this was a place to worship the stone. Now, many people would think that would be kind of stupid, but Sly had seen enough times where stones had power. And this wasn't going to be one of those times where it was an exception, probably. He then began to travel behind the wall behind there. And as he was walking, he failed to notice that he stepped on a pressure plate. Normally he would notice this stuff, but for some reason he didn't. Nearby, on the other side of the hall, there was a large door opening. Something big opened its large, small red eyes. A deep, guttural growl was heard as the creature then shifted onto its feet. Sly had only made it into the back room behind when he noticed there was a small tunnel down that way too. And it wasn't long before he saw the silhouette of somebody, the only person that could be down here other than him. Sly called out to Rin, who initially smiled in happiness. "Sly, you're here!" "I was about to say the same thing," Sly stated. The two came for a light hug. "Have you seen this old place, Rin?" he stated. "This place is huge." "Are you sure?" Rin asked. "I just came from a room, and I actually found this," she stated, showing him the stone. Sly gasped. "Rin, that's the miracle sapphire you got there." Rin looked at it. "Really? It doesn't really seem like much." "Are you kidding? That thing has been like the center of every single archaeological find the world has ever seen," he stated. Rin then questioned him something about how he knew that. But Sly just chalked it up to saying, "I don't know. I mean, it is one of the 8 lost treasures of the world, and I do kind of keep up with treasure. At least treasure that I can steal, that is." Rin just chuckled. But before they could actually talk further, a loud, guttural growl was heard. Something like this. They both froze in their spot. "Tell me that was your stomach," Sly asked. All of a sudden, a large, thick drop of liquid dropped between them, and it seemed to sizzle the ground. They both looked up slowly, turning behind them, when they saw, well, they didn't know what the heck they saw, but it was something. The creature resembled a large theropod with large green scales. However, there was a problem with this creature. The thing was massive, even bigger than a giga. The creature also had large, hulking masses of red skin on its back, with large spikes going along its body. Rin kind of laughed to herself mentally, because thinking that it looked like an overgreen pickle-colored dinosaur. The creature had theropod-shaped legs, 2 small arms that had 3 fingers, 2 enlarged ones on the middle, and a large one on the middle, and 2 on each side, one of them resembling a thumb. But it was the creature's face that got them more terrified. The creature didn't seem to have a regular theropod face. Instead, the creature looked like it had put its face inside of a bunch of chips. Or maybe it had a bit of shark DNA in it. The top half of the mouth resembled flatness. It had many rows of sharp teeth. The bottom half seemed to have a large chin, and that chin too was covered in massive rows of teeth that seemed to go all the way down to the bottom. The creature glared at them menacingly, growling as if it was hungry, starving even. A moment passed. Both Rin and Sly blinked at the creature. It was silent for only a moment, but that moment was broken when the creature reared up and roared. The roar was so loud that none of them had ever heard of it before. True, they had heard their fair share of roars from other creatures, but this was something else. It sounded like a cross between a gargoyle, a lion, and a crocodile. Both of them screamed as they ran for the small hallway, but the large creature began to lumber after them. Its speed surprisingly fast for a large, thick beast. Rin and Sly then found themselves at the hallway. Before Sly grabbed Rin realized that they were probably going to run into a worse problem if they just did that. The worst problem being trapped down here with this thing. Sly and Rin decided to try and take a chance and ran directly underneath the creature's feet. The creature, however, didn't seem to be very agile or smart. In fact, the thing didn't even snap at him. It just looked at him as it went in between its legs. The creature then realized it got duped and began to chase them again. However, its long body meant that it had to take twice as long to try and turn. Rin and Sly were able to go out of the open archway when Rin noticed how big the cavern was. That and the long narrow bridge that was before them. They jumped down right before They jumped out over the steps when they all of a sudden heard a big thump sound. The creature was so big that it couldn't even fit through the archway, and it seemed like it tried to push itself through, but its massive muscles on its back and shoulders seemed to be stopping it. "Ha ha!" Sly stated. "How do you like that, you oversized toothy maw?" Rin kind of was worried about what was going to happen. Sly, maybe we shouldn't antagonize the monster inside the giant building." "Oh, yeah, like what's it gonna do? It can't get us," Sly stated. All of a sudden, a crack was heard. Both Sly and Rin looked up. Apparently, the creature even heard it too and looked up. A massive crack was seen at the top of the archway. The creature then looked at the two, almost as if it had a new determination in its face. "Run," Sly stated. "Yeah, run." They both then hightailed it across the bridge. The creature then still trying to get itself through the archway, almost as if it was trying to push itself through. Rin was able to keep running, but Sly then stopped halfway across the bridge. He then looked behind him. He then looked at the bridge. If this bridge was able to hold those two up with no effort, then that thing could possibly get across. Sly then thought about the area above. If this monster got out, not only would this be a problem for everyone around them, it would also be a catastrophic nightmare to have to handle for anybody. He then looked at the bridge and noticed that there was a small chip in one of the sides on the side there. He then got an idea. Using the hook side of his staff, he began to try and use it to slice a small crevice in between the whole middle of the bridge. The bridge itself, while it was still sturdy, had aged a bit. So Sly was able to make a slicing maneuver to make it to where the bridge would probably get cracked underneath some sort of pressure. Rin was already on the other side, calling out to Sly to get back over here. It wasn't long until she saw on the other side of the bridge that, well, the creature then got out with a massive crunch sound. The creature then roared out in triumph and saw Sly standing there. Sly then decided that Sly was able to get done with what he was doing, but he also made a small X right at the center of the crease that he made. Sly immediately looked at the beast. He then used his hand and gave a command motion. The beast was bewildered and literally growled with anger. The creature then began to lumber across the bridge, kept on getting closer and closer and closer. Rin kept on trying to call out to Sly to get his butt moving, but Sly was determined about something. He held up the staff with a small blunt end at the bottom. He held it up high, and right before the creature got to where Sly was, he slammed it down right in the center of the X. All of a sudden, a large crack was seen. The sliced part where Sly had been cutting with the hook end managed to create a large crack there. But it was the footsteps of the lumbering giant in front of him that caused the cracks on the other side of the bridge to start happening. The beast didn't realize this until one of its feet gave out, and the creature realized far too late what was going on. It roared at Sly, gnashing its teeth and maw at it. But it was too late. The creature literally fell into the cavern as the back half of the bridge collapsed. The creature itself was flailing out in anger, roaring in defiance as it fell down into the pit. Sly then looked down. He was going to say have a nice fall, but he thought it would probably have been in bad taste. This time, with a loud monster being heard, the creature itself literally could have been hearing all the way down until thud, boom. Almost as if, and it's at that moment, the creature's roar was no longer heard. However, Sly may have stopped the monster, but he also inadvertently caused something else, as he felt the ground shake around him. The cavern was starting to collapse upon itself, and Sly knew he had to move his tail now more than ever. The two then began to go up the stairs that led to the opening up topside. But apparently, right before they got halfway there, the large door opening to the topside was starting to close. Rin and Sly literally kept on running, and right before the door closed all the way, they jumped straight underneath it. However, Rin's hat literally fell off her head, and right before the door closed, she was able to grab it and yank it back before, boom, the door closed itself. Rin and Sly, however, Rin got back with Sly, who then also was still running, because the ground was starting to collapse underneath them. That is, until they made a final jump, and the ground stopped collapsing underneath them. All of a sudden, the large archway that brought the people down underground was starting to crumble underneath, shifting down into something that was akin to a sinkhole. Apparently, the sinkhole itself began to fill itself up with rocks and dirt, and then, poof! Almost as if it had fairly collapsed on itself, a big dust cloud popped out of the hole. Ren and Sly looked at each other. They looked at the situation, and they just saw. All of a sudden, Ren started chuckling, which led to both Ren and Sly laughing. Laughing so hard and so much they fell back on the ground, literally rolling with laughter. The adrenaline high that they had just experienced still forcing it through their veins. And after that brush of death, that was an exhilarating experience. "Remind me never to do that again," Sly stated. "I'll remind you now while we still can," Rin joked. They then began to look up at the stone. Rin then pulled out the stone and showed it to Sly. "That's the miracle sapphire, all right," he stated. "Looks like our client's going to be happy." She then looked back at the hole in the ground and wondered, what was that thing? It wasn't until Sly called her that she snapped out of her concern. She then saw Slyhead was already heading to the other side of the forest, and essentially, Rin chased after him, leaving the glade just like they did before, just as silent as they did last. Only this time, there was a massive crater in the ground. It was an hour after they left, however, that if they had stuck around, they would have seen something terrifying. The rocky ground began to pulsate up as the large green monster threw itself out of the ground, its body covered in scars and bleeding. The creature also had an eye missing, roaring and glaring angrily at everything. The creature was extremely weak, but apparently its determination was strong. That is, until a strange noise was heard, sounding like... The creature then turned, when all of a sudden a small humanoid shape with a elongated head on the back came out of nowhere. The creature then roared out in defiance as if it was about to take one last battle, but all of a sudden, boom! The small humanoid figure literally held its hand out, stopped midway, the creature's body fell to the thud. The large green monster fell, and into a distance, the top half of the creature's skull fell right out of the sky. The being then changed its shape, revealing itself to be a tall, humanoid-shaped cat-like figure with a long tail and, surprisingly, a cloak covering its face and body. And of course, as it looked at the carcass, it then looked at where Rin and Sly left, with the dark blue glowing eyes that Rin had saw before. So, she stated, we are out of time. Thank you so much for listening to this reading. Hopefully I didn't get any characters misrepresented or said anything that they probably wouldn't have said. Please keep in mind that if you do see something that I may have made a mistake, please let me know and I shall adjust it in the next chapter. Hopefully I'll be able to get a second chapter out much sooner than I did this one. Man, I have been putting this one off for a long time. I really do hope you enjoy it. For those of you who don't know, for some of the creatures, the first one was Actonaut that was described. The second one was Jagras. And the third monster that was underground, the big toothy guy, that was Savage Devil Joe. I thought it'd be interesting, instead of making him a creation of the bad guy, I finally retconned it at the last minute to make him like a guardian of the stone. But with a little more bit of a savage temper, though. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Credit to the art goes to Rin Camellia. Her channel will be in the description below. Hopefully I will see you all in the next video, and until then, as always, my name is Powerbound, signing off. May the wild be with you.